Hi everyone, and welcome to CPC's online devotional for Tuesday, April 28th. I appreciate you joining with me in this virtual online time. As always, I wish we could be together in person. In the meantime, again, just please know that you are in my prayers. I want to start today by sharing the sad news of the death of Steve Crate's mother, Margaret Crate. Margaret, who was 98 years old, passed away this past Saturday. So we want to keep Steve and Linda Crate, all their family and loved ones, in our prayers during this time of grief. There will be a service for Margaret at a future date in Newport News. Again, please remember Steve Crate, all his family and loved ones in your prayers as they grieve the death of his mother this past Saturday. When I was in seminary, many of you know, and this was many years ago, of course, my second year of seminary, I worked as a student chaplain at the maximum security state prison in Trenton, New Jersey. It's called Trenton State Prison. And in the prison, one section of the prison where I worked was called administrative segregation. It wasn't solitary confinement in the full sense, but it came close to that. It was an area of the prison where the prisoners were very much segregated and kept to themselves most of the time. Well, I thought about that as I've been reflecting on our time of extended quarantining and self-isolation and so forth that we're going through now. And I came across an article the other day that spoke to this whole issue. Actually, they had interviewed a man named Keith Lamar, who has been a prisoner in solitary confinement for 27 years. And he says that he feels that solitary confinement is a form of torture and should be abolished, and that the kind of isolation and quarantine that we're going through now because of COVID-19 is a walk in the park compared to that. But he did talk a little bit about and reflect on his life in solitary confinement in a prison and what he might be able to share with us to help us during this time when our lives too have been shut down and isolated and quarantined a good bit. So listen to what he says. Being in solitary confinement is really just being thrown upon yourself. You're running around just like people do in your regular life, and now all of a sudden you're confronted with yourself and find that in a lot of cases you haven't really put anything into yourself to occupy yourself. Everything is outward directed. That's what happened to me 27 years ago. And what happens to a lot of the guys who are initially thrown into this situation? It's like being thrown into the ocean. You have to learn how to swim. You have to learn how to deal with yourself. I've been lucky in a lot of ways. My cell has a bookshelf with 3 shelves, and there's a table to sit and write. I have a lot of music, books to read, not to distract myself from myself, but to take me deeper into myself. I paint, I work out, I do yoga, I meditate. I've watched quite a few people fall apart, lose their minds, but I went in another direction. So 27 years later, I'm still around in mind and body and spirit. I attribute that to just reading and cultivating myself. That's the thing. When you're thrown upon yourself, you realize you are more equipped than you realized. A lot of the system keeps us from realizing our own power. It's a good opportunity for people to tap into that. Hopefully, young people being forced to stay home outside of the mainstream curriculum are able to get a glimpse of themselves and start pulling on that thread. The article goes on to talk about how at a time like this, we have to stop seeing solitude as an experiment in subtraction and start seeing it as an experiment in addition. What you're adding to yourself is yourself, your true self. A true self because at last it's you who's building it, not anybody else. You're no longer looking to other people for their attention or approval. Without realizing it, we look to other people to scaffold our sense of who we are. It's they who perform the construction of our identity. When we're alone, though, when their judgments and preferences are no longer there to shape our self-concept, it tends to break down. And that can be terrifying, but it can also be a gift. Because when the false self falls away, it leaves space for you to build a more authentic self. I would not in any way want to minimize the loneliness that people feel now during this time of self-quarantining, of being at home by ourselves, the loneliness that goes with that. In no way do I want to minimize that. But I would suggest that this is an opportunity that we don't ordinarily have, a time to go deeper, to sink within, this time when we are thrown upon ourselves and we do not have the distractions so much of what other people think of us, what other people say about us, their construction of who we are. Now we must do for ourselves. And that's the self that God calls us to be, our true, authentic selves, not the self that we shape to fit in with other people, the self that we shape to fit into society or to please other people, but our true selves, the self that God has made us to be. So insofar as you're able during this time of greater isolation and more alone time, I just want to invite you to embrace that and to allow God to be with you in that time, to spend time alone before God and ask God to speak to you, to draw close to you, to be within you, to transform you from the inside out, to help you know who you truly are as a child of God, as opposed to the self that so many other people would have you to believe you are. So I want to close with a verse from the hymn, "Open My Eyes That I May See," and I'll just offer this as a prayer. Open my eyes that I may see glimpses of truth thou hast for me. Place in my hands the wonderful key that shall unclasp and set me free. Silently now I wait for thee, ready, my God, thy will to see. Open my eyes, illumine me, Spirit divine. And finally, just a verse from Psalm 27. Wait for the Lord. Be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Take care, everyone. Know that you're in my prayers. Please keep one another in prayer as well. Goodbye.